Hello, my name is James Spiro, and this is CTech's BiblioTech series. I'm joined now with Judah Taub, the co-founder and managing partner at Hetz Ventures. Previously, Judah served as head of data at Lansdowne Partners, as well as an advisor to multiple young startups. In the Israel Defense Forces, he served as an officer in a classified intelligence unit, where he engineered a large-scale project that won the IDF 2014 Creativity Award. His new book, How to Move Up When the Only Way is Down, is designed to transform readers' decision-making by recognizing local maximums and skill building based on lessons from AI. Judah, thank you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
I read the book. I've got it here in my hand. I had a great time. I was on a plane to Asia, and I had 18 hours. So I sat down, I read the whole thing almost in one sitting. I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to speak to you about it. So thank you so much for taking the time and chatting with me today. First of all, I'd like to understand a bit more about you and the inspiration behind writing a book like this. So why don't you tell the viewers at home who may not be so familiar with basically what the book is about and your inspiration, please.
Yeah, so thank you, James. And I will say that every time we speak, I'm impressed by the level of professionalism. I do a decent amount of podcasts, especially now around the book. And it's always impressive that you do your research. You started off by saying you read the entire book. We chatted a bit before this. I know you did. And it's not something that viewers should take as a granted. It's very impressive what you did. So well done to you and the rest of the team. The inspiration for the book was really a combination of three things. The first is I was doing a course, and as part of graduating from this course at HBS, you had to do a project. And this was the project that I felt like I wanted to do. And it was good to have something that sort of pushed you now to sort of fulfill a passion. So that was sort of part one. Part two is, as a venture capitalist that sits on boards, especially of early stage founders, startups, what a big part of your job is speaking to the founders, typically late at night, when the day-to-day stuff is sort of calming down and they're not on other calls, and they have that little bit of mental space to deal with the big questions. Are we heading in the right direction? Is there a huge thing that we're missing? Should we be pivoting? And it's a real privilege as a venture capital sort of person to sit on these boards at such an early stage where the pivots are not like small because you're already sort of a big company. These are huge changes in the direction of a company. And for me, it was like I'm having very different conversations with the different founders, but there's a number of recurring themes across them. And one of them is really at the crux of this book of, are we climbing the right mountain? Is there a different mountain that is potentially better? And then the third and final piece is I'm a little bit of a data geek myself. And one of the realizations that I had maybe a few years ago was that some of the techniques that engineers use to optimize algorithms are no less applicable to humans making decisions. But on the first one, we as society are spending billions of dollars, literally billions. So Google and Amazon and Facebook are spending billions of dollars literally every year to try and optimize the way algorithms learn to make decisions. And it just makes sense that we should leverage some of those insights to how we make decisions. And maybe just to finish on that note, so it doesn't always mean you have to listen to what an algorithm would do, but not at least asking the question of what an algorithm would do to at least be aware of these other opportunities is in my opinion, suboptimal. So like chess players today, so grandmasters today, all use software algorithms, not to tell them what they have to do, but so that they're aware of moves that they wouldn't at least have considered. I think on decision-making, there is certain types of decisions, and especially the one that's at the crux of this book, the decisions of a local maximum and how to avoid it, is one that actually AI is quite a bit better than humans at.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I really enjoyed the way you explore this idea. And one of the metaphors, I don't know if it's a metaphor, if it's kind of a real life example, but one of the things you keep going back to here is the actual mountains in the Negev in Israel. So you talk about IDF soldiers or founders who climb these either literal or figurative mountains, thinking they're at the top, only to discover that they climbed the wrong mountain and now they are at their top, but it could have been bigger, greater, taller, all of those things. That's a very human feeling, isn't it? The sunk cost fallacy. It's no, I can't go back down and start again because I'm already here. I want to keep going. And that's quite a hard thing for humans to come to terms with, whether they recognize they've made a mistake or they're reaching their potential. What are some of the ways that humans can learn from AI in these things? And maybe we're getting a bit geeky, and between the two of us, maybe we're getting a bit technical, but you mentioned that AI is maybe sometimes better at addressing these types of things. How can humans adopt some of those AI lessons?
Yeah. So just to clarify to everyone, the key challenge that I'm discussing is the goal of everybody is to reach a higher point, a higher altitude. The higher out point in a field could represent, if you're a startup, a higher valuation. If you're an individual making more money, this is the very capitalist ones, or other things could be like more happiness in my life or doing more good. So you can define success however you want. And the point is higher up in the field is better, lower down is not as good. And we as individuals are walking around, we see a path, studying medicine, or taking my startup down the freemium and then trying to somehow later on monetize my community, or whichever path I decide to take is a mountain. And from that point, you'll climb up a mountain. And the challenge of a local maximum is climbing up a mountain, which turns out to be a mountain that only reaches a certain height. And sometimes during the climb, and sometimes only at the very end, do you realize there's a much better, taller mountain elsewhere. And the challenge for the individual is, how do you know which mountain to climb? At what point do you start trying to go down one mountain to go up another? Are there certain characteristics of individuals that make it easier for them or their companies to move from one mountain to another? So metaphorically, to either jump or just build in some level of agility so that you can go down and back up. And those are really the different elements that I try to provide techniques to. AI is interesting because for software, usually climbing is very quick. So once I tell a piece of software, this is the solution, just now optimize this one last bit, the climb, the software can really do that very, very quickly. The part that the software takes a lot of its time to do is figuring out, of all the mountains, which one should I climb? So just let's give an example. If I am Google search and I'm trying to figure out what type of mountain or what type of solution did the query want me to respond to? So like, what should be number 1, 2, 3? And now I'm just finding the last few that will optimize the result. That's already quite easy. The Amazon Prime route that the guy's trying to do and decide, like, I don't know, of the 50 spots on the map, how is it quickest to get to all of them? If I tell you, you've got to start here, you've got to finish there, and you've got to go through here in the middle, the rest of it is fairly quick. So for a software algorithm, the key challenge is picking the mountain. And that's why that is the part I think we can learn more from software. And I think a lot of the techniques, as I go through in the book, can be translated to human decision-making.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I mean, it's definitely such a human consideration. And you're right, it could be anything, right? It could be founding a company, it could be dating that new partner, it could be changing jobs, it could anything. We are deciding what mountains to climb every day. And some stakes are high and some stakes are low. And it's a frightening thing that humans have to do anyway. You end each part of your book with these things called bites of data science. And you make a point at the start by saying, listen, these aren't for everyone. If you want to skip them, go ahead. I read them because I couldn't imagine not reading every bit of the book. But talk to me about what those are for the viewers watching this and for the potential readers of the book. What are those bites of data science at the end, and how do you kind of bring all of your ideas together?
Yes, excellent. So the way the book is laid out is number one, it's hopefully not very long, and the fact that you read it all in nearly one reading is hopefully a testament to that as well. Because
Well, that says more about what a geek I am versus the length of the book.
Yes, true, I accept. But the point was to have something that is easy and digestible. I did actually write this twice. So the first time, which wasn't an entire writing, but it was very technical. And then the challenge that the both publisher and some of the other sort of folks who helped me gave me was, okay, this is nice, but this is like extremely technical. Try and get rid of everything technical and just focus on stories that show how the technique can work in humans. I really like the idea of having still examples of how this really works in a technical environment, but got their point of, if you want this to be something that just everybody enjoys, it's got to be an easier and more fun, story-driven book, which shows how this could help sort of people every day. So the way the book is laid out is you've got one chapter at the beginning, just giving an example of how local maximum works, a conclusion at the end, but the other chapters in between, I think it's about 8 or 9 of them, each focus on one technique that we can learn from software. And then at the end of each chapter, I think it's limited literally to 2 pages.
Yeah, it's not much.
Yeah, it's 2 pages at the end of each chapter is an example of how Amazon or a leading healthcare company or GPT 1, 2, 3, 4 use exactly this technique to overcome their own local maximum. And hopefully, one of the advantages a reader will get will be just also understanding a little bit how the engineers who build these softwares think about sort of programming to get a better result for their end users themselves.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and my mind isn't naturally inclined to data science, so for me it was a fun way to end the chapter. Although it was a bit tricky for me, but I loved the challenge of it. One of the areas that you discuss is, and one of the examples you kept on kind of bringing in the book, you bring in real life experiences. One of them was the Netflix blockbuster business saga, which kind of we all know what happened there. We all kind of know the end game of that, and also the famous one of Theranos with Elizabeth Holmes. And you talk about kind of that journey, which a lot of people may be familiar with through the TV show and documentaries and podcasts that have come out. It's actually one of my favorite books. Bad Blood is the book about that story specifically. Why did you choose to include those kinds of examples alongside the IDF experience, which you highlight a lot with some of your fellow soldiers? Just talk me through how you chose those examples to articulate your points, please.
Really good question. So I tried to firstly find examples from 2 types of worlds. The first is how we see this in a business environment. And there you sometimes have examples from big companies like the Blockbuster versus Netflix or Theranos, etc. I too read Bad Blood, fantastic book. So and the idea in each story was hopefully to try and read it in a relatively new way. So like the part of Blockbuster versus Netflix, and I read the case studies, and most Ivy League universities use it as a case study, but I actually think a lot of those case studies are reading it wrong. And so just to take that as an example, one of the quotes which really sort of dropped the penny for me was, I think it was the CEO of Blockbuster, only months before they went bust, saying, I don't understand why everyone's fascinated with Netflix. We have everything Netflix has and more. And I think the part that is missed is that they have more. And sometimes more can actually be problematic. And when you look at the company Netflix, which is by definition far more agile with a lower capex cost base, versus something like a Blockbuster, which has clearly climbed a mountain. It's high up a mountain, but it happens to be the DVD rental mountain. So they're further up the mountain because they've bought, 9,000 stores and millions of DVDs. and they have like huge amounts invested that they're all the way up this mountain and they're really not agile. I think in that chapter I talk about like the muscular person versus the agile. And so for me, the interesting take was, how do you build an agile versus a muscular type? And I think I also gave the example there of how large language models are slowly becoming less muscular and more agile, comparing sort of GPT sort of 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. And that was like the data byte. So to answer your question, I tried to take a lot of business stories that show a point. And I think what is unique about the army is very often what I try to show is training. So when you're about to start your career, when you're about to choose who to hire, when you're thinking about your org chart, when you're thinking about how to build a team that makes an agile, to continue that chapter, approach, what are some of the techniques that you can do in building that? So usually I would try and have in every chapter a story showing what happens, and that's usually going to be the business one, and how you could train for a different scenario, and that's usually going to be an army-ish type story.
Yeah, no, it was wonderful. And for me, someone who hasn't served in the IDF, I was really enjoying these parts of the story, because I was learning about some of the real nitty-gritty tasks and challenges and training that you folks all got into. And I just found that alongside everything else, I found that really interesting. One of the areas of the IDF that you highlighted, which maybe I'm showing my ignorance here, for me, I had no idea about it. It's called the Ipcha Misabra, which I probably butchered that pronunciation, so I do apologize. The English translation of that is roughly the Devil's Advocate Unit. And that's something you highlight in the book, and it's something you address. Talk to me about what that unit in the army is and how that tied into what you were discussing in the book.
Yeah, so the term Ipcha Mistabra actually comes from Aramaic, and it comes from the Gemara, where when the Gemara makes one argument, sometimes it will say, actually, it turns out the opposite is true. Ipcha comes from the word hefech, and mistabra, mistaber. So the opposite turns out to be true. It's actually the part of the book which I found hardest to write. I wrote the book all before October 7th. And it was obviously published a long time after, which tells you something about the publishing industry more than anything else. And this is one of the units that has been and probably will be highlighted in the future that needs a variety of changes. And so the only area in the book that I asked the editor to touch post October 7th is I slightly tweaked some of those paragraphs because it was just very difficult to read. So and you could literally see 2 paragraphs that I added post October 7th. Putting that aside, the basic notion of Ipcha Mistabra is to try and allow people, both lower ranks and an actual unit, to provide an opposing opinion and not just go ahead with one notion. And the idea is, if going back to the local maximum, is one of the types of characteristics that a company or individual that is prone to finding themselves in a local maximum is somebody or an organization that thinks in a very, very similar way across the tiers. So if I have to now build a software algorithm that will nearly always land in the local maximum, is make a decision early on, and regardless of any other information that you collect along the way, don't even look for more information. And regardless if it comes, carry on up the mountain you've currently chose. And the idea I think I gave in that chapter is not just Ipcha Mistabra, there was a few others, but techniques to try and make sure that along the way, you are spreading your knowledge, not across just the one mountain you're climbing, but as much as you can across the field to try and learn if there are other pieces of information that could potentially change the mountain or even the way you're climbing the current mountain. And one of the ones that I mentioned is the idea of having an inbuilt Ipcha Mistabra, which could be, if I'm an individual, an hour a week to check. It could be somebody who argues the other case, and it could be devoting some resources to doing this exploration rather than just running up the current mountain.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful, and it was something that really resonated with me while I was reading it. Also, it's just such a, I don't know, maybe such a fundamentally Jewish idea of just always questioning and challenging and thinking what else can be done and why don't we look at it in this way. So I found that to be a very healthy concept that you discussed in the book. I
But
want
by
to
the
talk about.
way, there is in the Gemara when they talk about sort of Ibra Mistabor, there's also I think it's in the Gemara, but I don't know, but it's a joke where they talk about Jewish philosophy, and an example is given is that if you know all ravens are black, that bird is a raven, so a Greek philosopher would come along and say, therefore it's black. A Jewish Talmudic Ibra Mistabor would come along and say, all ravens are black. That bird is a raven. Therefore, either it is black or there is a new type of bird which we haven't yet learned about. And the idea of questioning everything constantly is a very Jewish philosophical type of approach.
It's definitely a two Jews, three opinions kind of thing.
Yes, yes.
I want to talk about the end of the book, where you highlight different areas where we could reach local maximums, and you talk about different areas in business and in society, and it kind of read to me like a bit of a future prime minister, future president manifesto, where you highlight all these bits of society and you say like, this is where we can reach this, and this is how we do this, and this. So I found it to be a very inspiring way to end the book. Can you talk us through some of those things? And I can highlight a few if you wish, if you need some prompting.
So the real challenge that I gave myself is to try and make the book as practical as possible. And the challenge for me is that I love the genre of, I don't know, the Malcolm Gladwell books, etc. You sort of read them, it's fun. And I don't mean to sort of belittle anything that these folks do in any shape or form. The point is sometimes you find yourself at the end just saying, okay, it's a nice idea, but I'm just not sure what I should be, if there's anything practical above a nice read. And so what I really wanted to do is give practical examples of how a local maximum approach could be different. Now, to be very blunt, I am not an expert on how government should change, how education should change. And I gave like 5 very big, sort of bold examples. The real point I wanted to make is, in theory, one could look at these problems and would maybe come to this type of conclusion. So I'm not arguing that everything I said is necessarily 100% right, but the point is, if you put on the local maximum lens and say, okay, now let me look at these challenges, which are very clear. Healthcare systems globally are all sort of under severe stress. The cost per GDP in every country is exploding of healthcare systems. So how would a local maximum approach potentially look at this? And I am not pretending to be the global expert for healthcare systems. The point is, here's maybe 3 or 4 pages as a whole with 3 ideas of how this would work. What I didn't do, by the way, in the book is give a prescriptive. So I don't think there is a 1, 2, 3 solution to everything. I think what there is a toolbox. And in your toolbox, you have roughly 8 to 10 different tools, a hammer, a spanner, a drill. And then depending on the problem you're trying to solve, and this is how the engineers work with AI, you don't always put the same technique out there. If I'm trying to solve healthcare, so I said, maybe I would use these 3 tools that you read about in chapters 2, 5, and 7. If I'm trying to solve, I don't know, the governance problem, etc., maybe I would use a combination of these 2 or 3 tools. So for me, it was really, let's try and take the tools that I've described in the previous few chapters and see how potentially they could be applied to these problems that my guess is most readers are aware of.
Yeah, no, for me, it was a very optimistic way of practically applying all the things that we read about, and as viewers of this episode will hopefully see, and how readers will see, the stories start with, digging a hole in the desert in Israel, and then they end at global healthcare systems and governance and really big ideas that will inspire more of those discussions that we just mentioned. Listen, Judah, I'm really sorry, but yeah.
I just mentioned that by definition, a local maximum approach is going to be optimistic. And the simple reason for that is most folks are thinking about incremental improvements. So a small step up, because we're on a mountain, we're constantly trying to optimize and get a little bit higher. Every step we take is just a little bit better, or hopefully a little bit better if we even can. And the local maximum approach is 1 second, guys. There may be a mountain, there may be solutions, systems, ways we can live that are not marginally better than us, but are better than the ones we're doing, but are actually dramatically better for all of us. So by definition, I think people who read the book or look at problems with this type of lens should be more optimistic.
No, definitely, and I hope they will be. Unfortunately, we're approaching the end of the time we have now for today's episode, but I do want to leave. I want you to have the final word. I want you to tell everyone who's watching or listening right now where they can get a copy of the book, where it's available, and tell us some passing words on where people can get their hands on this fantastic book.
So first of all, thank you very much, and really it's great to be on this show. Honestly, there's a whole variety of places you can get them, but the one I usually say is just Amazon because it's just easy. But there's a whole bunch of stores, but if you go to Amazon, how to move up when the only way is down, it should be at the top of the search.
All right, wonderful. Judah, thank you so much for taking the time today to discuss the book. I really loved it, really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to the next one if you have it in you. I know that writing a book is the last thing anyone wants to do when they finish writing a book is start a new book. But I'll be watching and I'll be a fan of yours. Cheers, Judah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.